I think every marriage has ups and downs. Let me just start with that. And one of the key things for us is that once we have a long-term perspective on such a union, I think it is important to keep that going, right? So marriage is not just something you survive. Marriage is something that you really have to thrive on.
Hello and welcome to the Connect to Marriage podcast. I'm Jo and I'm your host for this episode. Now, in each episode of Connect to podcast, we'll be tackling questions that couples ask about marriage, communication, conflict, intimacy, and much, much more. So we hope that you will keep tuning in to learn with us as you grow closer, deeper, and stronger in your marriage. Now, in the journey of marriage, there will always come a time when conflict and tension arise. For any marriage. And for some couples, when working through these issues, they emerge stronger, but for others, the process can be more challenging. There's a quote by Ruth Bell Graham that says this: "A happy marriage is the union of two good forgivers." And so today we have our guests, Mario and Shalyn, a very good-looking couple here who are two good forgivers who are here to share with us on kindness and forgiveness in marriage. Welcome to the Connect to podcast, Mario and Shalyn.
Hi.
Hi, Jo. Thank you for having us.
Maybe you can just introduce yourself to our listeners.
Sure. My name is Mario. I'm an entrepreneur and investor. I enjoy writing, so I published 4 books, and the two of us, we run a family charity. And our charity is called Soul Rich Foundation.
Hi, I'm Shalyn here. I'm a mother of 2. Chantel is my eldest. She's 15 years old this year, Sec 3. And my son, Elliot, he is 12, coming to 13 this year. Yeah, Sec 1.
Okay, so what you can't see because you're not here in person is that Mario is actually a Sikh and Shalyn is Chinese. So they are a cross-cultural couple and they've been married for how many years?
About 17 now. We got married in
about
January
17
2007.
10 years.
Yeah, and we're going to take a little sneak peek into how did you all meet?
Sure. Well, I can start by sharing that. So I used to be in the training scene. I know several trainers in the industry. So this was a trainer who ran a program called The Courage to Create. And at the point of time, Shalyn was actually working in that company. So my friend said, bro, come and just join the program. And you guys will know how it is, because I didn't pay for the program. He just said, Mario, just come. I wasn't really paying attention to the content of the program. I was very fixated on one particular person because Shalyn happened to be there. And she had this mystery about her because during the break times, she would just disappear. That piqued my interest even more. She will either have lunch somewhere else or the trainer had something for her to do. So I think that was the start of how I was attracted and interested in her.
Does that story match?
Yes, it matches, yeah. For me, like the first time I met him, he was like one of the participants. And I was also inside the program itself. I always avoided this group because he came with a few other of his partners, to observe the program. And I'm a quiet person. He's a very loud person, and he talks a lot. And then this guy keep coming. He's like big and huge, I'm so small and petite, so I sort of like get frightened by his demeanor. Yeah, so I tend to like keep quiet and go away. But as we approach in the program, he seems to be a nice person. So we got into the same group to continue in the program. And then that's where we started from there.
I think it's always fascinating. We say opposites attract, right?
Yeah.
We have two very opposite people. And
Yes.
Indeed, if you are me here sitting with them, you can tell that, yes, Mario is the talker and Shalyn is the more quiet, reflective one. But today, Shalyn is actually the director of their home affairs.
That's true. That's true.
And I think this is probably quite typical of many couples, and whether you call it the power balance in our marriage or whatever. But, let's jump into this whole topic about kindness and forgiveness. How important is it in your marriage? How does that factor into your marriage?
I think every marriage has ups and downs. Let me just start with that. And one of the key things for us is that once we have a long-term perspective on such a union, I think it is important to keep that going, right? So marriage is not just something you survive. Marriage is something that you really have to thrive on. So kindness and forgiveness, we find that these are the two very important handles that not just keeps it going, but actually helps the marriage to thrive. So that was the reason why, well, especially in our marriage, we make sure that we have these two handles called kindness and forgiveness. Shalyn, actually, she summarizes it even better. She actually collapses both words into one. She has said to me multiple times, Jo, she says, living with you, I really have to practice long suffering. And I thought that was an excellent conjoining of the two words kindness and forgiveness is this word called long suffering.
And I think that probably applies more to our loved ones, particularly our spouse, right? I mean,
Yes.
sometimes we are more kind or forgiving towards others outside the home. And I know both of you do work alongside sometimes,
Yes,
even though you are the director of home affairs. But is there like a difference of, like, let's say Mario, he would treat his co-workers and people out there in the marketplace versus how he's like at home, especially towards you?
Definitely, but I guess it's because of the familiarity at home. Outside he's the boss of his company, so he needs to carry certain weight, and then he needs to be kind to his people. But for at home, he can throw his tantrum much more easily, much more, at ease. When he's unhappy, he will really show his face quite obviously. Yeah.
Well, I show that to the company as well, just to balance it up.
You do?
Well, when we say show the displeasure, but after that comes the remedy, right? If not, people will not understand like where things are right, things are wrong. So again, the practice of kindness and forgiveness. That's why I keep saying, like, why these two things are really such important handles, not just in a marriage, even outside in the business world. Because sometimes if we don't carry that as part of remedy, I always call it the part two. Part one is always, okay, there is displeasure, certain things are not done well. But immediately the remedial action of kindness and forgiveness has got to come in.
But why is it so difficult to extend kindness and forgiveness, particularly to our spouse, who should be the primary recipient of it?
Well, I can start off by saying this. I think it boils down to two factors. Number one, I'll call it mismatched expectations. Number two, I'll call it self-centeredness. So let me explain. So from my perspective, and we have talked about this over the years, as a couple, we feel it is healthy to have expectations. Because if it's not, then how does the union get so close, Because you always want to be a champion and an encourager of your spouse. The problem with that comes when expectations are somehow not met or somehow not clearly communicated throughout the union. And then that boils in that animosity, that frustration, that anxiety. So I feel number one is mismatched expectations. And number two, because of the way human beings are wired, I guess, a lot of it is rooted in self-centeredness. It's about me first, and it's about me first, or you didn't meet my expectations, or you didn't live up to this. So these are the two keys I find. Number one, mismatched expectations. Number two, most of us tend to be rooted in self-centeredness.
But you think that particularly in marriage, since we have made our vows and promised to love each other in good times and bad times, that we exercise a little bit more leeway to our spouse. But it seems like most of us would struggle to show kindness or express kindness and particularly forgiveness towards our spouse more than, we are ready to perhaps shrug it off if it's just our colleague or someone out there.
I can learn to accept that part because I feel that you're close enough with your spouse that he's able to be the true self of himself. He's able to, really show his emotion up or down. So on my part, I learned to receive it.
How do you receive it?
That's why I say this 16 years, I have developed this spirit of long suffering. Really. Initially, it's very difficult because he can be really, really quite strong in his character, And I used to be a very strong character person. I will fight with him till the end of time, We really fight it out. But after some time, I think that, it's not going to work this way. So I learned to be a bit more submissive. I learned to choose the battle to fight. So I learned to see what is worth fighting, I will fight. What is not worth fighting, sometimes I will wait. Even if it's worth fighting, sometimes I wait. I will calm myself down and he will have his way. He may think that he is right in doing certain things.
You may think that
Yeah, but even though he's wrong, he may think he's right. But I learned to actually calm down and wait. And then eventually, and it has proven many times that after I wait and be calm, eventually the truth is I'm right and he's wrong. So sometimes I don't have to fight the battle, At the point of time of fighting, it can be really bad and it can hurt a relationship. Sometimes, keeping quiet and give it some time, actually the truth will show
I think
itself.
this is really an important tip for wives out there who are listening. What are the battles we should fight? What are the battles we shouldn't?
Correct.
Can you give us some examples, Shalyn?
Marriage is one of the most rewarding things in life. Yet, navigating marriage as newlyweds or an engaged couple can sometimes get overwhelming. Whether it's managing expectations of the in-laws, getting a good grasp of your family finances, or establishing good habits of communication and healthy conflict. Focus on the Family Singapore's Marriage Preparation Program aims to help you build a solid foundation in the early years and prepare you for the adventure of your life. Visit family.org.sg/C2 Marriage Prep for more information today.
Initially, when we got married, I cannot take it. I'm a person that's very clean, you know. I like my toilet very clean. And he will not lift up the toilet seat when he pees. He will like, after brushing his teeth, the Colgate is just on at the side, you know. For me, I will keep it and then put it back in the right place. So I was really mad, you know, and little nitty-gritty things that he does, I really cannot stand it. And to that extent that I was thinking, what am I getting myself into, you know? You know, why am I living with this creature, this animal, this monster, you know? And I really couldn't. And then slowly I learned to accept certain flaws, certain things. Of course, I did tell him, you know, about how I feel, you know, maybe can you improve on that part. But after a while, I learned to accept certain flaws. I mean, certain things you don't have to fight, you know, just accept it. Like another example is like my son's tuition. He will always ask me, okay, Monday, what is Elliot having? You know, Tuesday, what's happening to Elliot now? You know, where's Chantel now? Then I say, you remember I told you at this time, at this date, every Tuesday, he's having tuition, but he will keep on asking me the same thing over and over again, and it's very frustrating. Initially, yes, we fight, but after a while, I say, okay, yeah, he's having tuition. Remember I told you before? Yeah, so I gently tell him the same thing, and I learn to accept that I will always be needing to tell him the same thing. And then that solves. So to me, I'm okay already. After some time, it's like everything is fine.
This reminds me of the serenity prayer that goes something like, you know, God, give me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, the courage to change the things I can,
Yes.
and the wisdom to know
Yes,
the
and the
difference.
wisdom to know the
Yeah.
difference. That's right.
I admire that quality in her genuinely. Just by her sharing that example, between the two of us, she's the more calm one. And there's been multiple times, Joe, because I tend to be a bit more, I don't know, is emotional the right word? Because sometimes when things get to me or when I get a bad day at work, you know, and because you don't really have masks in the home, right? Your spouse knows exactly who you are. They know your true, authentic self. And sometimes when there's cases of outbursts, she really has the wisdom, I'll use the word, to know, even though she's right, she doesn't really engage me then. Then, you know, she waits for me to come down and then she starts poking me, you know, with certain questions. And it really is not just helpful, it's really wiser.
So you admit she's right.
Of course. In this particular instance.
You know, as the saying goes, right, familiarity breeds contempt. You guys were talking about how in the home, towards our spouse, perhaps it's because we are just so familiar, there are no masks, right?
Yes,
we don't have to
correct.
pretend, we can be our true self. But the downside of it is that it could really breed contempt. Our spouse sees our true self, they might not like what they see, right? So is that where forgiveness, kindness, how does that play into the situation?
I mean, we've been married like what now, 17 years. And I guess over the years, the key for us, we've got to develop this long-term perspective. Because when you keep things in perspective, right, a lot of times when we are fighting or we are having all these quarrels, things are just very short-term. But to put things in perspective, when you look at things for the long term, I mean, if you take those marriage vows seriously, till death do us part, right? Then a lot of the things honestly become very trivial. And when they become trivial in the light of what's bigger and what's grander at the end of it. So that's what I mean by, you know, taking this marriage as a real lifelong union, which both of us take it very seriously. Then kindness and forgiveness comes in as handles to really just solve many of the small issues.
I think earlier you mentioned that because we're not just aiming for a surviving marriage relationship, but really a thriving one. Can you give like examples, since you've been married for like almost 2 decades, key moments when, you know, we need to remind ourselves as a husband or as a wife to show that kindness, to show that forgiveness? Have there been such like significant moments or incidents in your own marital journey?
I think there are probably a lot, but I'll just share a quick story about this. So we run a foundation. It's like a local charity. It's called Soul Rich Foundation. And over there, we've got different pillars. So one pillar is called, say, well-being. One pillar is family. Recently, we had one of our part-time staff leave us for something else. So no one is really now checking the emails. And initially, I said, okay, darling, you go check the emails. But because she's also busy, she finds it a struggle to check. So my frustration is boiling now because I know that there are people who are trying to reach out to us but cannot get answers and all that. And yet, after a while, I realized, you see, this is again what I mean by mismatch expectations. And when that things happen, so we sit down and talk about it, I said, darling, let me do that. Even though it's not our default mode, to even be checking emails in a certain sense. But because now I put myself in her situation, there has got to be a reason why she doesn't check the email. It's definitely not the case where she's just sitting down, not doing anything. But in her list of priorities, probably that may not be as high because either the kids are more important or the well-being of the family is more important, So that's where really frank and open communication, I think, is just so vital, Joe. There's been multiple times, we have said this so many times, because we have already endeavored to ensure that we need to have that frank, open, honest communication. Once we have that, it's a natural tendency that kindness and forgiveness starts to come in thereafter, patches everything back. And today, to finish that story, until we find someone suitable, I'm the one checking the emails, and there is totally no grudge at all. At all. Right? Because of the watering of kindness, forgiveness, the thriving of the marriage, all these things come together to certain positive actions.
It sounds as if you're assuming the best of your spouse.
That's key. Assuming the best, but the good thing about that statement, Joe, is that genuinely, there is goodness in people. When you say that, an example comes to my mind. Michelangelo was carving this angel out of it. People said, how is it that you are able to imagine this beautiful sculpture? He just said, I saw an angel in there, and all I needed to do was to release her. So everybody has that goodness in them. Sometimes it's really down to this keyword that because of mismatched expectations, because there's no communication, you well up the frustration. As the frustration wells up, it gets even more and more difficult for you to express that kindness and forgiveness. We're always coming back to these two keywords because we really find, right, that it just doesn't help us. And I'm sure by talking about it, kindness and forgiveness are real handles that can be expressed in any marriage.
I want to add on, it's like for that to happen, open communication between husband and wife is very important. It took us some time from the beginning of our marriage. I was the one that's doing it. I was practicing it, and I was guiding him on this. He is the kind that will turn his back and run away when there is a problem between us. And I think most men are like that. They they run from problem. But women are the one that usually they will want to talk it out. Yes. So initially it's difficult for him to even sit down and for me to even talk about the things that we quarrel about. It's difficult. He will turn and want to run. I have to really take time, be patient and talk to him and to settle him down and to be mature about it. And then eventually it gets into the habit. It's practicing, basically it's practicing. And then we are getting better in it actually as it goes. After all these years, it becomes very natural for us. Sometimes he will be the one to wait for some time and then he will find the time to start the conversation with me.
But I can imagine that to wait out that period before your spouse reaches.
It's usually not very long. At most, it's 1.5 days. Because we cannot keep that emotion in us. We cannot hold that differences, that mismatched expectation in us for too long. He can't work, I know. I can observe him, he start to fidget. He cannot concentrate in his work. He get very restless. His face is all black, black face. And I will be in my nasty mode and then the children will get it from us. So usually we don't last very long, that cold shoulder period.
I
So
can imagine,
that helps.
just even so-called training your spouse to come to this place. Let's have the conversation so that, we don't build resentment, we don't hold grudges, we don't, we keep short accounts, right, basically.
One thing that Shalyn taught me as in a very unconscious way, right? So, we've been married for 17 years. Naturally, we both had that singlehood before coming to marriage in a certain sense. So that first transition, it wasn't easy. But I will always remember this is obviously more than 17 years back, right? So when I'm having problems, I can't remember what the problem was now, whether is it a personal problem or a business problem and all that. And I didn't really want to share with her. right? So, I mean, that's the man's natural tendency, as she put it, either to run away or to not share. And she looked at me in the eye and she said, but we are now one. We are now a union of one. We are now one flesh. Your problems are mine. You've got to talk it out. And that stuck with me for years, Joe. So I think that was key as to really upgrade our kind of mental scripts, because many of us are running on inner script. And after a marriage, certain scripts have got to change. And I think this is where she's absolutely right when she's, I don't know whether she said it just now, but women are generally more mature. I give you that. Really, thank God for women. Thank God for my wife.
Okay, this is good. In each podcast, we address a frequently asked question that couples have about dating and marriage. And today's question is, I have chosen to extend forgiveness to my wife. This is, of course, the husband speaking. But I do struggle with the worry that my spouse will take me for granted. So how do I keep loving her when it leaves me feeling actually hurt and in pain?
Such a great, honest, authentic question. The first key thing is that when the spouse generally does not understand your level of pain or your level of frustration, different people are built differently. Even though a spouse, right, you take years coming to really understand each another's feelings. And those feelings, those thoughts are obviously built on a bedrock of your values and your beliefs and all that. So a couple of things I want to say to that particular question. Number one, I think it is key that you communicate your feelings clearly, right? Because your level of pain and the way she receives your pain or your frustration may not be the same. So number one, communicating your feelings is important. Number two, communicating your expectations. Now, it doesn't mean that once you as a husband communicate your expectations that your wife may automatically meet the entirety of your expectations. But I think that's a great starting point. And your spouse truly cherishes you, truly loves you, whatever you say, they will take it to heart. So these 2 points I think are important. Number one, communicating your feelings. Number two, communicating your expectations.
Shalyn, do you have anything to add? I suppose this would also apply the other way around, right? If it's a wife extending forgiveness to the husband, but also worrying that the husband will take her for granted.
When you talk to the husband, you have to be really authentic about how you feel. Because if your husband truly loves you, he will receive your pain. And if he cares for the marriage, he will do something. So you really need to share what has really caused this hurt to you, how deep it is. And I'm sure the other party will do something to play their part.
Wow. That's great. Well, we've run out of time. So firstly, thanks Mario and Shalyn for just really being so candid in sharing just how important these practical handles of kindness and forgiveness is in marriage. And I'm looking forward to our next episode when, we'll dive deeper into how to take action and what that actually looks like in our daily interactions as husband and wife. Now, in each episode, we usually end off with a couple challenge for our listeners to do and share with each other. So if you're listening to this with your spouse, or if your spouse is not with you, you can share it with your spouse. Take a moment to rate the level of kindness and forgiveness in your marriage. Okay, and maybe explain a little why you rate it as such without judging each other. Well, we hope this podcast has given you some encouragement that really pursuing our spouse consistently and building a strong marriage takes effort, but it is the best investment that we can give in our marriage. So if you're looking out for more resources to grow your relationship and marriage, do visit our website at family.org.sg to browse our articles or check out our upcoming events. And thank you for tuning in, and until next time, do take care of yourself and your spouse.